Guten Tag, WAP. This is Mr. Liniger. Let's make history today as we go over Unit 3, Day 7. We're going to spend the next 2 days talking about Latin America and the age of independence movements. But let's get started with our daily punishment. I wasn't originally going to get a brain transplant, but then I changed my mind. My mind? Key terms for today: Haitian Revolution, Toussaint L'Ouverture, Peninsulares, Mestizos, Creoles, Zambos, Mulattoes, Augustin de Iturbide, Father Miguel Hidalgo, San Martin, Simon Bolivar, Gran Colombia, Rio de Plata, Dom Pedro, Cadillos, Federalist, Centralist, Liberals, Conservatives, Tupac Amaru. We're going to talk about the causes of Latin American independence, major leaders, some generalizations about what was going on after independence movements. We'll talk specifically about Mexico, Brazil in the 1800s, and some of the political ideologies and parties that developed in Latin America after independence. So let's first start off about Tupac Amaru. He was the last Incan emperor. He's going to lead a revolt against the Spanish. He'll fled throughout Peru. He will eventually be captured and executed. This happened in the 1500s, like 1542 to 1547. So this was before this unit, but this is another example of people resisting European imperialism. He also actually became very popular after independence. He became a symbol of nationalism and resistance. Let's talk about some of the causes of revolutions. The Latin American revolutions are part of a wider revolutionary movement in the 18th century. They're heavily influenced by Enlightenment ideas. They're going to be led by Creoles. Remember, Creoles are white people that were born in the Americas. These are going to be middle-class revolutions. The main leaders will be Creoles. They wanted to take power from the Peninsulares. The Peninsulares were whites that were born in Europe. They will be influenced by the American and French Revolution. They were also impacted by the Napoleonic War. In the Napoleonic War, both Spain and Portugal were conquered by France. So these Latin American countries had to govern themselves. So they got a taste of it. And once Spain and Portugal defeated Napoleon with a bunch of the European countries' help, a lot of the Latin American countries are not going to want to be colonized anymore. The first revolution is going to start under Toussaint L'Ouverture. This is in Haiti. It's a slave rebellion led by Toussaint L'Ouverture. They're going to turn on their white slaveholders. They're going to successfully overthrow the colonial government of Saint Dominique. They'll establish an independent free slave republic in Haiti, formerly slave. They'll invade San Domingo. They'll defeat the Spanish, the French, the English armies. This is going to frighten a lot of slave owners of there being another slave rebellion in their country. So this will frighten slave owners in South America, even in the colonial South, that they don't want this to happen in their country. Toussaint L'Ouverture will eventually be captured and executed, but Haiti will get their independence. Let's talk about some of the revolutions. Let's talk about Mexico first. Mexico revolution is first going to begin in 1810 under the leadership of Father Miguel Hidalgo, who is a Catholic priest. He's going to support the mestizos and Indians. Because of this, the Creoles thought he was too radical, and he will not get the Creole support. He will be defeated and executed, but there'll be a second revolution in the 1820s with Creole support. This will be led by a former general, Augustin de Iturbide, who will switch sides. He'll seize Mexico City and proclaim emperorship and make himself emperor in 1821. By 1823, that falls apart and Mexico becomes a republic. Originally, Mexico had control over all Central America. By 1838, Central America had broken up into small countries throughout the 1840s and 1850s. There's also going to be revolutionary movements in the northern part of South America and the southern part of South America. Let's talk about the northern part of South America. Simon Bolivar is going to lead the revolution in the northern part of South America. Between 1817 to 1822, he'll defeat the Spanish forces in Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador. He'll form one large country in the northern part of South America called Gran Colombia. However, after the 1830s, these nations will split into smaller nations. In southern South America, it's going to be led by Jose de San Martin. He's going to mobilize resistance in Argentina, and then Chile, Peru. He'll defeat the Spanish forces there. He will also try to create one unified country in the southern part of South America, Rio de Plata. This will also fail. By 1825, all the formerly Spanish colonies had achieved independence. But we're forgetting about Brazil. Let's talk about Brazil. Brazil is going to be unique. They're going to achieve their independence peacefully, different from the Spanish. The white population will fear a slave uprising. When the Portuguese were invaded by the French, the Portuguese royal family fled to Brazil. The king of Portugal realized that his country, Brazil, will want independence. So he told his son, the Prince of Portugal, to stay in Brazil and to become the new king there. So when the king returned to Portugal in 1820, his son will proclaim independence in Brazil and will become the first king of Brazil, Dom Pedro I. So Brazil will remain a monarchy, and it will also be pretty stable. There are going to be some common problems a lot of these nations faced. A lot of these nations had representative governments, except for Brazil. They protected rights of private property and free trade. There was less agreement on whether they wanted to take away power from the Catholic Church. Slavery will be abolished in most of these countries, except for in parts of the Caribbean and Brazil. Voting rights were still very conservative. They were tended to be only for the Creoles. Women, Indians, Poors, non-Creoles, mestizos, for the most part, were ignored and marginalized. We are going to have some political parties develop during this time. Let's talk about what some of these governmental ideologies mean. The first one is federalist. If you're a federalist, you want the states or the regions to have more power. If I'm a federalist in Mexico, I want Monterrey to have more power than the national government in Mexico City. If I'm a centrist, I want the national government to have more power. If I'm a classical liberal, I support federalist policies. I want to limit the influence of the Catholic Church. I want a weak federal government. If I'm a conservative, I want a strong centrist government, corporate institutions. I usually support things like the Catholic Church. We've talked about the words liberals and conservatives before. These words have pretty much the same meaning in this video. However, what's going to happen is not all these democracies were very functional or very strong. So there's going to be some military coups where generals are going to seize power and proclaim themselves dictators. There is actually a word for that. It's called caudillos. Caudillos are generals in Latin America that seize power and become kind of like dictators in parts of Latin America. An example of that is Santa Anna, who seized power in Mexico and became a caudillo. Brazil, with its monarchy, is going to be perhaps the most stable government in this region, ironically. America during this time will give arms and money and refugee to the leaders. They'll support the Latin American independence movements. They're going to promulgate the Monroe Doctrine in 1823, which tells the European countries that they can no longer colonize Latin America. This was really an empty document. At this time, America had no real army or no navy. It was meant to just be more of a symbolic gesture. Britain will also support these newly independent nations. Britain will trade with these new nations for their raw resources and will become the largest trading partner. These nations will still be producing raw resources, so they're still reliant on European countries for buying up their raw resources. They don't industrialize. Lastly, let's talk about the economy. After 1850, the economy is going to quicken through export of raw materials. They're going to export raw resources. Because of that, they still are going to be reliant on European countries for trade and bank loans. One of the unique finds here is in Peru, they're going to find a huge amount of guano. Guano is bird poo, bird dung. It's used for fertilizer, and the nitrogen there is used for weapons. Specifically, it's used for gunpowder and other explosives. Peru's going to use this money to diversify their economy, build infrastructure, and pay off their debt and provide for education. It's called the guano era in Peru. All right, guys, that's all I have for you for today. Until next time, deuces, deuces, deuces.